That's funny. All right. We've got Kevin in California. It's California Day.
It is.
Kevin wants to know why would I say that we don't choose our beliefs because he chooses his. So, how you doing, Kevin?
Yeah. Good. Yeah, I mean, to be quite honest, I hear you say that a lot. And honestly, it kind of shakes my faith and prompted me to call.
What do you believe that you think you chose to believe?
Well, that there's something after a place and someone overseeing it where we can reconnect with lost loved ones. I don't.
So you believe in some sort of afterlife, and you think you just chose this, and you don't think you were convinced in any way.
Well, I mean, if I have plenty of friends that are atheists, and we'll engage in conversations about this all the time. They love to, and it sort of always just boils down to, there's no proof either way, and so I choose to believe. But I also have to try, and it sounds weird, apply logic to my illogical beliefs. Like, for example, I went to a Catholic high school. It wasn't really like browbeat with religion by any means, but it says in the Bible, he's a jealous God and an all-powerful, all-knowing thing can't be jealous. It just can't happen.
Why not?
And so I can rule that out.
How could you possibly be all-powerful if you don't have the power to be jealous?
Well, it's not a power issue. It would be
that would be a flaw issue.
A quality.
How do you know that jealousy isn't a good thing?
Jealousy?
How do you know it's not a good thing?
I do not. I can't say I do. I just know that it's one of the 10 Commandments. And
no, actually, it's not. I mean, not coveting is a commandment, but don't be jealous isn't a commandment.
I mean, well, I guess I can't prove jealousy isn't a good thing.
Let's table that. Let's table that and get back to this issue of belief, because I asked what you believed that you simply chose to believe. And you talk about the afterlife, and you said, well, you can't prove it either way, so I just choose to believe there's an afterlife.
When you ask how did I what convinced me, I guess I'd have to say I'm convincing myself with trying to apply what I know to what I suppose I want. Okay, so there's another issue here, because I'm not convinced that I'm still not convinced you can choose a belief. I'm convinced you can choose to act as if you believe something, and I'm convinced you can choose to hope that something is true. But to actually be, you are actually convinced there's an afterlife, and you acknowledge there's no way to prove either way. So you merely choose to believe there's an afterlife. What else do you choose to believe about it? Who goes there and why? I would think virtually everybody goes there.
Is there a good place and a bad place?
I doubt that. Nah. I would think, if anything, you just create your own bad place if you are taken to the next place. So do you believe that do you believe that thoughts? I don't know.
Do you believe that you're in control of what kind of afterlife you have?
No. Absolutely not. Not really.
Why not? Why wouldn't you choose to believe that too? Because if I'm just going to choose to believe that there's an afterlife, why wouldn't I choose to believe that it's, puppies and kittens and unicorns?
Good point, because I'm trying my best to choose to believe something right to the point of delusion and not go past that.
Well, too late.
I think it's unreasonable.
The line is behind you. The second you opted for an afterlife and said that you don't have any good reason to believe that it's there, but you're going to believe it because you choose to and you want to, now you've opened the door.
Sorry.
Now you've opened the door to believing anything you want about it. And now you're fooling yourself by saying, well, I don't want to believe that it's, a happy place, Because that would be a bridge too far. Well, why didn't you stop before they're believing there was a place?
No, not. It very well will be a happy place for me, I would think, provided things don't go horribly wrong for me between now and death. But it won't be for everyone. But just, the puppies and kittens notion that just, of course I love puppies and kittens, so there's going to be a lot of that there. But what convinced you? I feel like none of the things that convinced me are external, and I'm almost just talking myself.
You said nothing convinced you. You said nothing convinced you, and you just chose it.
Yeah, I'm convincing myself. That's right. Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds now like you're describing a process of intentional self-deception. Like, I really hope there's an afterlife, so I'm going to act as if I believe it until I believe it. And that's what Pascal was arguing for with regard to God belief. You asked what convinced me. I'm not convinced there's an afterlife, so nothing has convinced me there's an afterlife.
No, I meant prior to your conversion.
Oh, that was easy. A bunch of people I trusted told me there was an afterlife. And I thought that was a good enough reason at the time. And when I found out it wasn't a good reason, I could no longer believe it.
So, there was nothing that you experienced other than just being told?
I've never experienced anything related to an afterlife. Have you?
No.
Well, no, not about just an afterlife, about God. I understand, you were surrounded.
Yeah, it was my belief.
People.
My belief was based on a bunch of preaching, which is essentially, let's take really bad arguments and disguise them. That's what preaching is. And when I figured out where the arguments were flawed and where there wasn't evidence to support it, once I was a skeptic who cared about beliefs, I couldn't believe it anymore. I couldn't even choose to believe it. I'm either convinced of something or I'm not. Everything else is hope and wishful thinking, but it's not choosing a belief.
Well, that kind of, I think, is a way of describing it for me. I'm preaching to myself.
Yeah, why?
In the same way, I know it sounds weird, but you had people preach to you, you believe what they said. I'm analyzing what I see, and then the parts that dissolve into gray areas of illogical irrationalness, I kind of just have to go on faith at that point.
Why?
Hoping that...
Why would you
have to?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, you don't have to go on faith at that point. You can simply abandon the thing. And if there's no evidence to support it, you can abandon it.
Okay, I know it's hard.
A lot of people I'd like to see.
I know it's hard, which is one of the reasons why we have these conversations. But if you say, I just have to go on faith. Well, first of all, no. You don't have to make a decision on something in the absence of sufficient evidence. But second, is there anything that you couldn't believe based on faith?
Oh, of course not. Yeah.
Okay. So if faith can lead you to both true beliefs and false beliefs, why would you ever willingly exercise faith? Why wouldn't you instead try to find a method that gets you more accurate results?
The specific reason would be that the way I use my faith dead ends to a place where it can't negatively impact my life, at least as far as I can see it. When I hope or choose to believe, and maybe a Freudian slip there with the word hope, but I choose to believe that based on things about physics, like energy can't be destroyed, it goes somewhere, there's possibly the energy that makes up your consciousness.
Okay,
remain
pause.
organized when it leaves. I don't know, and
pause.
I would like to believe that that's what happens.
Okay, I know you'd like to believe. That's why I was talking about wanting to believe, wishful thinking, hoping.
Right.
Here's the thing: this afterlife that you believe in, is it a part of the Is it a part of physical reality?
Yes and no. If I had to describe it, I would say
yes and no is not a viable answer.
I know, but I'll explain real quick. A big tub of balls are multiverses. The space in between all those balls would be where we're going. I don't know.
Okay, so
it's not really in our universe.
But if you're going to go to physics, what on earth makes you think the physics that you're appealing to applies in that area?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah,
Exactly.
It sounds similar, but it's not.
It's like you live in a house and we've got the thermostat set at a particular temperature, and you're telling me there's a place outside the house where the thermostat's probably set to a different temperature, but you can tell me all about it because of the temperature in this room.
Oh, I mean, yeah, I get what you're saying there. I guess I don't have a specific enough definition to go forward on. It's
I don't know. Let me ask you this.
Does anybody believe in the afterlife then? I mean, I don't feel like these reasons are any less legitimate than anyone that calls in. And
Okay, but if we're talking about something that's no, Daniel. Daniel. Daniel, pause. If we're talking about something that is unfalsifiable, if we're talking about something where there's no way to show that it's false, saying, well, there's other people who believe for worse reasons is not in any way amplifying your reasons, because you don't have a reason other than you want to. Dennis, do you think that in any simple sense we ever choose what we believe?
Oh, gosh. Well, from my viewpoint of free will, which we don't want to open that
I'm with
world, I'm saying we believe what our experiences and our brain structure force us to believe. I mean, it's like we're forced to believe what we believe. We don't really have a choice. So
you're either convinced convinced or you're not, and you become convinced for good reasons or bad reasons. And in your case, you're acknowledging that you've essentially become convinced of something for reasons that you acknowledge are bad. You want this to be the case. There's no way for anybody to prove you wrong, so it doesn't seem like there's any harm in believing this, and so you go with it. Is that fairly accurate?
Yes, that's incredibly accurate.
Yeah. And wouldn't you acknowledge that if I said to you, I'm going to choose to believe that there's no afterlife, that when we're dead. And while I can't prove it, it's what I want to be the case, so I'm going to choose to believe that. Wouldn't you look at me like, why would you do that?
Well, I could see a lot would. Maybe I wouldn't, but yes, I know what you're saying there.
My position is, and the thing is, the argument against an afterlife is vastly stronger than anything that could be made for one. Because what we know about who we are as people and how our brains work and everything else, all the evidence points to the fact that dies when the brain dies, because it's malleable and alterable here in reality. There's the V.S. Ramachandran talked about a split brain patient where the corpus callosum was severed, and you end up with two distinct independent personalities who communicate independently, so that one half of the brain is able to speak because that's the portion of the brain that controls speech, and the other half of the brain has to communicate by writing or pointing to things or whatever else. And so you put a screen up in front of this person and you say, are you a woman? And, to point to no, and, you ask it other questions, and then it's like, do you believe in God? And the part that's speaking will say yes, and the other one's pointing to no. Now, we can reset memories, personality, preferences, everything about who we are is malleable in the physical world. Right. There are people who will say, yes, but what's actually happening is there's a ghost in the machine, and you're tampering with the ghost's ability to control things.
Yes, your brain is a receiver to the signal from your soul in some...
But if that's the case, then these two personalities in the same brain, did just a soul get split in half? Are there two souls? Was there one soul and it just inhabited one half of the brain? And how do you tell the difference between a brain that is fully under the control of the soul versus a brain that is fully absent control by the soul? Until you can make that distinction, and the fact that we can recognize that this is possible, you could have mountains of people walking around, taking actions, making decisions, living life, and yet they're completely divorced from their soul. Which, if that's possible, then saying there's a soul in some other situation is something that's completely unwarranted. You can't ever demonstrate that.
Yes. Yeah, I cannot. It's just a constructed theory model that I have constructed in my head. But I'm starting to concede maybe that hope is not synonymous with belief.
Correct. We're in complete agreement. And if you say that you hope there's an afterlife, I can at least appreciate that. While I don't necessarily hope for an afterlife, if I found out that I got to live forever or even a longer time or there was some kind of afterlife, I'd be like, cool. But until I have some time to believe that that's going to be the case, I'm going to focus on the one and only life that I know that I have, and that's the one I'm living now.
Right. Also, belief is like a binary. You either believe something or you don't.
There are people who argue against that.
I know.
I'm in complete agreement with
wrong.
you. And it's because when you and I talk about belief, we're talking about the state of being convinced. And so you are either convinced or not.
Yeah, if you almost believe something,
You don't believe it.
You don't believe it. Yes.
Fucking love Dennis. There we go. Hey,
I see.
So Daniel, it's not. So,
Hope
It's
sounds like almost believing something.
I have called you Daniel several times now, haven't I? And your name's Kevin.
It's okay. Everyone's from California named Dan today. I got
You get mixed up.
At the bottom of my call list, which we're going to go to in a minute, is Daniel from California as well. And so I wasn't looking at the on-air button. I just looked at the bottom. I apologize, Kevin. The thing here is,
spelled my name right. It's good.
when you ask why we say we don't choose beliefs, that's why. Dennis and I view belief in this when we're talking about it. We're fine if somebody wants to talk about belief in a different context, where they want to say it's a spectrum from disbelief to belief. Sure, you're a 4.5.
Okay, sure, but I think you're talking knowledge there.
I do too. You're talking about confidence levels, which is almost by definition knowledge. But when you say you're either convinced or you're not, that's all we're saying, that you can be convinced for good reasons or bad reasons, including bad reasons of this process of intentional self-deception, where you hope something is the case, so you begin to act like it's the case, and you gradually convince yourself, you become conditioned to it.
You can do that.
The only thing that I would say, which I think Dennis might agree with, is that you cannot, absent convincers and time, just say, I'm going to choose to believe this. I'm going to choose to believe that I can flap my wings and fly. I'm going to choose to believe that there are exactly 4 gods, and they are male, female, non-binary, and trans, whatever. But you can come up with anything like that. And if you say you actually believe it, that comes with baggage. Because when you believe something, it informs other decisions. No, I don't think there's any belief that exists in like a vacuum. Like there's a spot in my head here that believes that this pen will fall when I let go of it, and it only exists in that spot. Because the actual belief itself informs my actions, and the reasons I came to those beliefs inform the process by which I come to other decisions. So for you specifically, Kevin, when you're looking at this and you say, well, there's no way to prove it either way, and there doesn't seem to be any harm in me believing it, the potential harm in you believing this is, if it's not true, then whatever process convinced you to believe it still exists in your brain, and that process can convince you to believe other things that are also not true.
And those may be dangerous.
So believing one believing one thing that's not apparently
I can't argue
dangerous.
with that, although I feel like
The other thing is,
led to something too unreasonable, but I don't know.
how do you know, if you believe there's an afterlife, how do you know that's not affecting your decisions? It could be affecting your decisions in a good way. It could be. I'm not saying that it's necessarily a bad thing. I'm only talking about the epistemological warrant for whether or not it's true. You can do good things for bad reasons. I could believe that, I'll go to heaven if I give 20% of my income to the church. Now, that belief may encourage me to give money, and that money may on occasion go to good causes. But that doesn't believe my belief was warranted. And it also doesn't mean that instead of giving 20% of my income to the church, that my 20% income might be better used by going to other charities that don't have the religious baggage as well. You can encourage people to do all kinds of good things for bad reasons. And we do it all the time. Parents do it with their kids every freaking day. You better behave or I'm going to beat the shit out of you. Okay, beating the shit out of them is a bad thing. Stop doing it. Stop threatening it. Oh, well, I can't argue with kids. Then you shouldn't have had them. Let's get some people who can actually reason. Oh, well, you can't reason with a 2-year-old, You don't know what you're talking about, Matt. You don't have kids. I know, but I've been around lots of kids. And you know what? I never had a problem reasoning with a 2 or 3-year-old. It's one of those things where you find out who they are and what they can understand. And if they can't understand it, stop holding it against them. A very good friend of mine just said something yesterday. We were watching MasterChef. And there was one of the chefs on there, I think his name was Suba, was a little slower, and some of the other people didn't like him, and he got paired with somebody. And one of the things that frustrated people is he didn't appear to handle stress very well. And they're standing on the sidelines kind of yelling at him, hurry up, hurry up. And she was like, why are they doing that? Why are they being so mean to this guy? If you know that they don't handle stress well, why are you increasing the amount of stress?
Right.
And if you know that a kid's not going to be capable of understanding reason at the level you are, why are you trying that? Meet them where they are. And if they can't get there, stop fucking judging them and help them. It's a process. The 2-year-olds aren't supposed to think the way we think. They're learning. And if what you end up teaching them is that you need to be good or you're going to get a spanking, or you need to be good so that you get a reward, you're messing up, because what you should be teaching them is empathy and an understanding that the reason to be good is for its own sake and because you would like to live in a world where people are good to you without a carrot and a stick. Kids can understand this.
Yeah.
Kids know what it's like to be bullied, and that's what makes bullying people is what makes bullies.
True.
But anyway, I got off on a wild ass tangent there. But yes, Dennis and I are still believe that you don't choose your beliefs in any simple sense. But also, as we are skeptics and critical thinkers, we would caution people that if you think you are holding a harmless belief,
you might want to examine that.
You might want to re-examine that.
Well, I guess it's maybe it is just a really intense hope that I just kind of semantically.
And there's a lot of people who look for that hope.
How does anyone believe then?
Especially about afterlives.
Well,
The
there are plenty of things where belief is warranted. Like, obvious things like when I let go of this pen, everybody's de facto belief is warranted that it's going to fall to the table.
I'm talking about God, though.
Oh, yeah.
That's the thing.
I had to really alter my God beliefs with the most special pleading probably of all that I justify with logic anyways. That's irrelevant. But it's probably just hope. And I guess I just didn't want to admit that. And every time I'd hear you say you can't choose your beliefs and you kind of scold people, I'd get all.
I apologize if it came off as scolding.
No.
That's a rather pedantic correction. That is about me. No. It's about me trying to get to clarity, to get people to a certain level of understanding, because our language is sloppy. And language, by the way, is our bitch. It's a tool that we use to communicate, and we get to play with it. We get to make new words. We get to massage things. We get to speak in code and have shorthand and all this stuff. It's the concepts that matter. And when the words get in the way, or you don't have the words for the concept, like our caller earlier who had a problem with that, then you set aside the words, invent a new word for the purpose of that conversation that points to a specific concept that you both understand. So if you and I wanted to talk about an afterlife, and we couldn't agree on what that meant because one of us is coming with Christian baggage and one of us is coming with other baggage, then we would invent a new word and actually sit there and define it. There is something after this life that we will experience, and that would be the sum total of it, and we'll call that Benalthma. Maybe something easier to pronounce.
Yeah, probably.
I don't know, I can't keep coming up with real words like puddin' pop or whatever, and I don't puddin' pop in it. Anyway, I'm sorry to drone on about that. The key here is whether or not you and I agree that we choose our beliefs in any simple sense. You now have a better understanding of what Dennis and I mean by that, and you hopefully have a better understanding of what you mean by it, because you were recognizing that it was a lot more like hope, and that hope isn't necessarily synonymous with belief. And hopefully you take that on board and realize that, okay, evaluating whether or not this pen will fall is different from evaluating whether or not a God exists. But that's not the fault of reason. If there's a God and he's real and he's intentionally putting himself in a category where he's unfalsifiable and untestable, That is that God's problem. But what it also means is that nobody could possibly be warranted in believing that God exists because he's playing the world's most impressive game of hide and go seek. And if you don't believe, if you're not convinced that a God exists, when a God is intentionally hiding from epistemic warrant, that's not your problem. And any God that would judge you for failing to believe when they're intentionally hiding is a dick and unworthy of respect or worship or anything else. And so you've got nothing to fear from just saying, you know what? I don't know. It'd be nice maybe if I got to live forever, if I got to see my loved ones. I can't prove it either way. I kind of hope that maybe that's the case because I'd like to reconnect with some people. If it's not the case, I'm never going to know because I'll just be dead. But saying you convinced yourself to believe something.
Yeah. I hope the convincing yourself that there's an afterlife is not an attempt to protect yourself. Because that would mean you've lost someone and you don't want to actually lose someone. You don't want to believe someone's gone.
Yeah, I mean, basically, I don't want to live forever so I can just watch TV forever. I mean,
yeah, but believing in an afterlife out of self-defense so you don't have to deal with reality because reality is painful. I hope it's not that.
No looking to check out early. No.
I know, but
like that.
Are you dissatisfied
with my life?
Are you dissatisfied with life in general, and that's why you're optimistic about an afterlife?
No, in fact, very satisfied, and just the thought of having key people in my life.
No, it was a great point for Dennis to break.
Well, that's the thing I was worried about. Let me put it flat out. If someone you love dies, to avoid the pain of their death, it might behoove someone to try to convince themselves that they're in a better place. Yeah, and I hope that's not what you're doing because that would mean you lost someone.
Oh, well, I mean, I have lost people in the past, grandparents, things, pets. Yeah. And I do.
It's hard.
Hope that there's a better place, I guess. So, I mean, that's about as far as it goes. I think I really had the intent of trying to be just super honest. I feel like a lot of people call in and they're not totally honest. And I feel like facing the fact that it's hope and not belief.
We greatly appreciate it.
In the ass and it hurts, but I mean, anyways, I kind of feel like we've gone as far as we can go with this.
Yes,
I agree. And you and your call were great. I appreciate the honesty and the thoughtfulness and the fact that you're willing to actually, answer questions. Take this comfort that you had with kind of saying, oh, well, maybe it's that, and maybe I don't know, and just apply it globally across your life because it's going to turn out that that's going to be the right answer more often than not.
Yeah, you're right.
Live with uncertainty.
Anyway, I appreciate the time and the call, Kevin. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah, I hadn't, having taken calls on the afterlife so often, I didn't suspect that his reasons were in that category.
I didn't either because he didn't bring it up.
Right.
But I thought I would mention it just as a thing. It's like if you're looking for a reason to convince yourself of something, avoiding pain, might be a.
Well, I would argue that's probably one of the biggest reasons that we have some of these beliefs in the first place.
It's not a good reason, but it's definitely a reason.
But also, I'd like to point out that it's completely understandable.
Yeah.
Especially when you live in a world where our views of life and death and our views of grief have been so strongly tied to these religious notions that are designed to make it easier. I've been long have I been convinced that if we taught people from the beginning that death is the inevitable consequence of being alive, then we would do a better job of appreciating that life and appreciating those people in our lives while they're here. And then if it turns out there's an afterlife, I could view it as nothing more than like a bonus that I would, oh, surprise. Hey, look, I was wrong. And I'm actually kind of happy I was wrong, It's, but yeah, if it's a way to avoid the harshness of reality First of all, you grieve the way you need to grieve.
Yeah.
But if it's incredibly difficult, by the way, it's worthwhile pointing out that there is the Secular Therapy Project. And for those of you who are dealing with difficulties after finding your way out of religion, there's recoveringfromreligion.org. I got a message from Daryl the other day who was on the show. As it turns out, his visit to the show was phenomenal. And Recovering from Religion not only had, I won't say it unprecedented, it may have been unprecedented, far more calls in the short time frame after the show.
Good.
But also more people applying for volunteers and everything else. So if you're one of those people, thank you for watching, thank you for caring, and then actually doing something about it, because you can care all day long and not actually do something. So.